Applying for a job can be stressful. Usually you're worried about doing something or saying something wrong, but did you know that there are also questions that they can't ask you? Tonight, and Know Your Rights, what a prospective employer cannot ask you.
There's a whole lot of jobs out there. The trick is finding one.
I feel nervous because, like I said, I've been out of practice for not having to do one for 12 years.
Sean Glines worked at Blockbuster for 12 years. Now he's trying to get a job working at the front desk of a hotel or for one of the airlines.
I've got a good personality. I'm outgoing.
We interviewed him at the Department of Labor building, which is also where Darius Smith McLendon is also looking for a job.
I wanted to go into the police force, but anything with helping anybody or helping people.
We learned about them during an interview, the same as an employer. But there are certain questions that a prospective boss can't ask.
There are 13 areas where you've got some level of protection.
That would be questions about race, age, sex, national origin, or religion. Are you married or do you have children? And questions asking if someone is pregnant or if they have a disability are all no-goes.
I think they run into them all the time because the mail I get, the email I get, the calls I get are that people are being asked a lot of questions.
Dr. Lynn Curry is an author and expert on workplace issues. She says if someone asks you questions about the forbidden topics and you feel like you didn't get a job because they didn't like the answer, you can file a complaint. She also said, remember the interview starts the moment you walk in the door.
If you're being interviewed, there's nothing that's small talk. If you're being interviewed, you're being assessed from the moment you sit down in front of the receptionist to the moment you get in the elevator and leave.
So put your best foot forward, avoid personal information, and good luck.
I'm honest, I'm a hard worker, I'm reliable.
And that's a lot to offer.
If you are house or apartment hunting, it pays to know your rights before you start your search. Channel 2's Jill Burke has more on how to safeguard against unfair fees, bad landlords, broken down units, and outright discrimination. Jill?
Alexis and Rebecca, a house in disrepair, bad roommates, fee-hungry, racist, or discriminatory landlords, young or old, single or married, nobody wants these headaches. And here's how to avoid these problems. And in the event they do occur, a few go-to tactics to get relief.
First off, the biggie, your identity, the things that make you you. They can't be used as excuses to deny you access to housing. That means based on
your race, your religion, your national origin, color, gender, disability, or familial status.
Familial status is fair housing lingo for families with children. Dan Kuntz is a fair housing expert.
If any time a landlord appears to be treating you different as a housing applicant or as a tenant already, then there are laws that say that that's illegal.
If something seems off.
Sure, sometimes it's very overt, sometimes it's just a suspicion.
Federal, state, and city laws can help sort it out.
We can dig into that a little more and try to prove that the intent was discriminatory, not necessarily just an innocent misunderstanding.
There are also housing protections for survivors of domestic violence.
If someone is trying to extricate themselves from a domestic violence situation, then the survivor should be the one who's allowed to stay regardless of whether they're on the lease, regardless of all the other factors. They're the ones who should be able to stay in the home, and the perpetrator should be the one who's forced to leave.
If you're disabled, you also have a right to safe ways to get in and out of or move safely within your home.
It is discrimination to deny a request for a reasonable modification, which means a sort of structural modification to a unit like a ramp or a grab bar.
Is a specially trained dog or other animal a loyal helper? They get to be a part of your home, and a cost-free one at that.
If that animal is an assistance animal that's required because of a disability, then they're generally not under the same sorts of pet rules, and it wouldn't be appropriate to charge extra.
The Alaska Landlord-Tenant Act covers other aspects of being a renter. For example, a landlord cannot raise your rent during the term of a lease, cannot charge you for normal wear and tear, and cannot collect more than 2 times the monthly rent for a security deposit. A landlord also has to maintain safe, healthy living conditions. If they don't, You might be able to withhold rent, but only under certain circumstances. To try to solve issues, deliver a signed, dated letter explaining the problems to your landlord. Whether small issues or big ones, sometimes all it takes is speaking up.
Often they're not aware of what the laws say about this.
If that doesn't do the trick, seek out expert help.
It's just important for people to know that these protections exist.
So obviously there's a lot of information out there. We have much more of it on our website, including a link to Alaska's Landlord Tenant Guide and legal guides for seniors and youth.
Alaska is among the states with the highest rate of gun ownership in the country, according to a new report by the Centers for Disease Control. It also has some of the most liberal gun laws.
And tonight's Know Your Rights, Channel 2's Rich Maurer explains what that means if you decide to carry a firearm.
On the subject of gun rights, Alaskans may be better versed on the Second Amendment than they are other basic rights. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right to the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
I think people need to understand how that sentence is constructed. There's a comma.
That's Eddie Grasser, one of Alaska's foremost gun rights advocates, and he says that comma means that gun rights belong to the individual. In fact, the U.S. Supreme Court said a decade ago that the Second Amendment protects an individual's rights to carry a gun, though it has also said the states and the federal government have the authority to regulate deadly weapons. That's why machine guns, for instance, are illegal.
I haven't been called a communist, but people certainly get pretty passionate about their feelings about Second Amendment.
Erin Tarr authored a bill on something called gun protective orders. Her idea, someone having a temporary mental health crisis could have their guns taken away. The NRA at first didn't oppose the bill, but then the bill was changed in response to other concerns, and the NRA began opposing it. What are Alaska's laws? Well, you don't need a permit to carry a concealed pistol in Alaska, but many people get a permit anyway because they can use it in 38 other states. Gun laws vary greatly by state. In Alaska, you can't have a loaded gun at a bar or carry it into a home where the owner doesn't want it, or in a shelter for domestic violence victims, or in a courthouse, or if you're a felon. Or if there's a sign against weapons like at the state capitol, though there are many stories of legislators packing in the Capitol. Just about everywhere else, it's okay to carry a gun. Tar says she wants to see more restrictions.
We can still love our guns, and what we can do is try to prevent innocent people from being killed or prevent someone in a crisis situation from killing themselves or someone else.
A 1994 amendment to the Alaska Constitution specifically says gun rights belong to an individual. Grasser says that even if the Supreme Court hadn't interpreted the Second Amendment that way, it should be implied.
I think America is the greatest country on earth because of the founding principle, which was found in the Declaration of Independence, called the Doctrine of Inherent Rights. And among those rights was, of course, the right to life. Well, in my mind, you can't have a real right to life unless you have a right to defend your life against evil people.
Alaska's fierce libertarian streak and its subsistence lifestyle, especially in rural Alaska, probably mean that firearms will hold a major place for Alaskans for decades to come, regardless of whatever happens elsewhere.
Well, as an Alaskan, do you know your rights when it comes to public information and privacy? In the Alaska Constitution, a certain degree of privacy laws exist in subheading reading, quote, "The right of the people to privacy is recognized and shall not be infringed. Legislature shall implement this section."
Unlike many police forces in the lower 48, the Anchorage Police Department does not release mugshots of suspects or notification of their arrest to the public. APD outlined why their hands are tied in this manner, saying the department does not own the photos and does not take its own. Spokesperson MJ Tim says this decision is directly related to the state of Alaska privacy laws, which, when they are interpreted by state officials with the Department of Law, prevent APD from releasing the photos.
Now, the photos themselves, which serve as mugshots, are actually Alaska DMV records and are paid for by the taxpayer and are owned by the state of Alaska. Now, because of this, Tim says the state owns the photos and the state decides when they'll let APD use them.
Curious which dog names are the most popular, or how your neighborhood school rates, or how much the mayor makes?
Grab your phones, fire up your keyboards. We're about to arm you with the tools that you need to be a citizen sleuth. Channel 2's Jill Burke has more.
Alaska favors citizen involvement in and oversight of its government. In fact, state laws give citizens rights to a lot of information, but to get it, you need to know where to find it and who to speak with.
The legislature has said this is a fundamental right.
Information, if it's said,
prerogative of the new administration to ask folks in the outgoing administration whether they want to remain.
Done.
I think this is
The beginning of the end of the permanent fund dividend.
Earned,
It's bringing in much needed revenue to the state of Alaska.
or spent.
Really gone through about $14 billion to get to the point of making the decision on Senate Bill 26.
It generally, with a few exceptions, becomes a public record. And those records give everybody the power to hold the powerful accountable.
When we appoint people to run, the government for us, we're delegating authority to them, but we're not giving them a right to decide what's good for us to know and what's not good for us to know.
Alaska's public records law is clear. Public access to government information is a fundamental right, one that operates to check and balance the actions of elected and appointed officials and to maintain citizen control of government.
The government affects kind of every corner of our lives.
That means everything from popular dog names to crime reports, business licenses, school performance, road construction, property records, restaurant and daycare inspections, local and state government meetings, and a lot of other things that affect your day can be obtained online by written request or in person.
Sometimes it's good to go in and say, here's what I'm looking for, can you help me?
A reliable go-to? City clerks.
We're here to help.
From elections to assembly meetings, they're in the know.
We are here to help the public get connected to local government.
One of Anchorage Municipal Clerk Barbara Jones's top public information picks, the municipal meetings page.
It lists the upcoming assembly meetings and the agenda.
That's not all.
If it's a past assembly meeting, it lists the past assembly meeting, but it has a link to the video and audio of that meeting, as well as the minutes.
The clerk's office is just a phone call away at 907-343-4321. And they're on Facebook and Twitter at ANC Muni Clerk. For our final tip, we go back to media attorney John McKay on how much money records should cost.
The legislature has said that the first 5 hours in any calendar month of search and copying costs are free for any person requesting public records.
Fees for research and copying shouldn't be so high they keep information out of reach.
They can't use their copying machine as a profit center.
As an airline passenger, you do have rights.
You just need to know the ins and outs in order to cash in on them.
Here's Channel 2's Beth Verge.
The horror stories you've likely heard of weren't out of Anchorage.
There is a variety of things that can go wrong.
Think of the United flight in which a passenger was dragged off a plane at O'Hare after United overbooked it.
It was a system failure across the board.
But even here in Alaska, while you might not have to worry as much about your flight being on time,
So the Ted Stevens Anchorage International Airport is actually one of the most on-time airports in the country.
there are other concerns. Bags here still get lost. Flights overbooked. And as for what you can get back,
There are a lot of misconceptions about what people expect. They expect they'll be able to call up the DOT, the Department of Transportation, and get the amount that they should be due. It's really not that way.
so what's a traveler to do?
What we're going to tell you is that when you have these issues, you need to contact the airline.
But before that, be proactive in knowing the passenger bill of rights so you can protect yourself and your belongings on those flights. A few things to know. According to federal consumer protection regulations, you can take the cash and run if you want. In some cases, passengers are able to get refunded for being bumped from flights, get paid for itinerary changes, and receive payouts for lost or damaged luggage. Remember, too, that your tickets actually aren't set in stone as soon as you pay for them. Most airlines will allow you to change or cancel tickets free of charge within 24 hours. Some allow free adjustments beyond that, too. You can also opt out of tarmac delays in some cases. By the way, airlines are required to move your plane to a location where you can safely get off of it before 3 hours for domestic flights and 4 hours for international ones.
It pays you to, go down in the weeds and read the fine print, something I hate to do, but it can really save you in a pinch.
Some avid travelers will suggest add-ons.
My best practice on that one is to get third-party travel insurance.
But if not, remember,
It's those expensive lessons that stick with you.
knowledge is power and can mean more money in your wallet should things go awry. Beth Verge, Channel 2 News.